Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Ortiz, and welcome to Policy Matters Now. So grateful that y'all are joining us a few minutes after the hour for today's conversation about the American Rescue Plan and you. This is our fifth and final session of our five-part series on how federal policy can make a positive difference in our lives. Now, at Policy Matters Ohio, we push for a more prosperous, equitable, sustainable, inclusive Ohio for everyone. And we wouldn't be able to do that without support from community members like you. So while you may be joining us on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, whichever platform, we do encourage you to please sign up for our newsletter, like, follow, and subscribe to get updates from us going forward. And for today's conversation, we invite you to ask questions throughout the live stream. Now, we may respond to you with a direct response or a comment. And if you have questions for our panelists, we hope to have time at the end to allow them to respond. But again, just thank you so much for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about specifically how the American Rescue Plan impacts essential workers. So for that, we have an amazing panel of experts. We are hoping to have Kalia Johnson, digital organizer with Ohio Organizing Collaborative, join, but I know we're having some technical challenges. We're also joined by Laura Nadal, who's the community organizer with Justice for Migrant Women. And we are also joined by my colleague, Mike Shields, who's a researcher with Policy Matters, and Zach Schiller, who's our research director. Unfortunately, our friend, Brendan Grayson with the Cincinnati Interfaith Worker Center, who had hoped to join us, is attending to some important family matters and sends his regrets, but we are excited to jump in and to have a conversation. And I think I just want to lift up that throughout the series, we've been just trying to grow the conversation around the big public investment coming with the American Rescue Plan. I think we restated this a few times, but we're talking about $1.9 trillion of investment is coming to our country. It's an opportunity for all of us to experience a just recovery from the COVID crisis. And overall in Ohio, we are getting $12 billion. The state government is going to get approximately $5.4 billion, and $6.6 billion will be distributed to cities and counties. My colleagues here at Policy Matters have researched and written about how the rescue plan and what we want to, for these resources to do to help people recover. But the challenges that we're facing often come back to, a few well-funded politicians and groups advocating for corporations, and they're up to their old tricks. They're pushing for tax cuts, and they're attacking working people. And they're repeating old stories of who deserves these dollars and glossing over the challenges and uncertainty that many working people are facing. But don't let them fool you. These attacks are part of a larger plan to keep us divided. And a lot of these bad ideas, continue to get recycled because people don't know the experience that a lot of our workers here in Ohio are facing. And for all the talk of fixing the economy, I think many of us forget that people make the economy. So I just want to share, yesterday actually I heard from the White House Director of Labor Engagement, and she shared, the Biden administration's plans to continue to push to improve conditions so that frontline essential workers are paid fairly and receive hazard pay. And, I think we all agree that, a strong recovery means an economy in which everyone can thrive. And I think the opportunity, the moment that we're living through, is that this could be a reset in the fight for worker justice, where we could win something better than what we had before the pandemic. And we can advance pro-labor policies, but to get there, all of us need to pitch in. So let's make sure that we talk with our neighbors, friends, and family about how big federal investment takes care of workers, and that we call upon our state and local leaders to carry out that job. So without further ado, let's dive into this discussion on what justice for workers looks like. And looks like we do have Kalia. Hey, Kalia, welcome. First question is going to go to you, and we'll also give everyone a chance to respond. But what is a top priority or concern for essential workers that you'd like state and local officials to consider before they make decisions on the rescue plan monies?
Thanks, Daniel. Hi, everyone. Just full transparency, there's some yard work going on in front of me. There we go. Lovely. So let me know if there's any, oh, wow. It's like perfect timing. One of the things that I think is essential for us to consider when it comes to essential workers is including the unemployed in all of these conversations. As we know, having a safety net, especially with the pandemic, even though we're like coming on the edges out of it, there's still a lot of people who are suffering, who are going to be impacted by the governor cutting the $300 with the federal benefits. So even though we are close to normalcy after 2020, it's not over for a lot of us and for a lot of families out there who still need relief, be it because they can't afford childcare, their jobs have not opened up back. So I think including the unemployed as essential, as part of these essential conversations, and determining where the funds really need to go in order for us to bounce back properly from this economic crisis.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kalia. Next up, Lara. Same question. What is a top priority or concern that you would share?
Well, thank you so much. First, I'd like to share a little bit about Justice for Migrant Women and how we come into this work. Justice for Migrant Women is a national organization based here in Fremont, Ohio, and we aim to ensure that all migrant women are guaranteed civil and human rights. Because of this, we work with a lot of farm workers and other essential workers that are often not afforded these basic rights. Additionally, we have a very specific focus on rural communities. And part of this work Justice for Migrant Women does has been in partnership with Essential Ohio, a big coalition here, and the National Essential Workers Campaign, Always Essential. These two campaigns came to be because for the first time in a long time, due to the COVID-19 crisis, essential workers and other low-wage industries became more visible to the public, elected officials, and even the companies that employ them. And a lot of these low-wage sectors that these industries are in are disproportionately Black, Latinx, and other workers of color. So when we think about the ARP funds, our main goal is that the money should go back to the community and to the hands of these essential workers. The spotlight on essential workers has illuminated all the ways our economy is not functioning for essential working families. They deal with low wages, a lack of a safety net, no enforceable health and safety standards, and little or no collective economic power. Because of all of this, we should fight that the ARP funds be used to provide things like hazard pay, labor standards, and other steps that are going to guarantee a just recovery. And it's also important that we're doing whatever we can to make sure our elected officials are really listening to essential workers. Because the reality is that leaders from both sides have not shown leadership to protect essential workers like farm workers and others throughout history, including during this pandemic.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Clara. Mike, what are the top priorities and concerns that you'd share?
Thanks, Daniel. The American Rescue Plan Act is an historic opportunity to begin setting right a lot of longstanding racial and economic inequities that the pandemic has exposed and worsened. The health and economic impacts of COVID-19 have fallen harder on more marginalized Ohioans, but some of the injustices that we see in our economy are not new at all. They're just clearer to see. Addressing this has to include centering the people who have done the critical frontline work that has gotten us through the crisis so far. We're going to talk hazard pay and workplace rights later in the hour, but I think the top line is this. Essential workers need and deserve dignity at work. That includes safe workplaces, fair pay, and a voice on the job.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Now, Zach, bringing us home, what are the top priorities and concerns that you would lift up?
Well, I feel that the other panelists have already covered a lot of the major ground here. And what I would say is that we need to really push back and push back hard against the notion that the pandemic is over, that everything is fine and normal, and we can just do business as usual. This is not a time for business as usual. We have a quarter of Ohioans who are saying that they are having trouble meeting basic expenses. We have almost 300,000 fewer jobs than we did before the pandemic began. I could go on with other statistics, but the basic point is we are not anywhere near normal. We are experiencing all kinds of dislocations that you're seeing all about you, whether it's, the fact that used car prices are up, or that you can't buy chlorine tablets if you have a pool, or that, the auto companies don't have enough memory chips to make their cars. This is a very unusual time for the economy, and it's one where huge numbers of Ohioans, hundreds of thousands, really millions of Ohioans, are still suffering the effects of the pandemic. We've got to make sure that the ARPA money is used in a way, as the other panelists have already said, that goes first and foremost to meet their needs and to create a better framework for our economy and for Ohioans going forward.
No, thanks for that, Zach. I agree. We are not quite there yet. And I would also just lift back up, the way in which, so much of the conversation is really being drowned out by all these voices from the business community driving the narratives that we're seeing in the media. And I would hope that we continue to see more of a process on engaging workers and worker voices and centering that as we continue to move forward for a just recovery. And with that, let's dive into this conversation. I know that we touched base a little bit on this, but in talking about essential workers and hazard pay, I'd like to maybe first start off with Laura. We heard about essential workers early in this pandemic, and I guess, is this essential worker concept, is that still relevant?
Of course, COVID-19 taught us just how much we all depend on essential workers. They kept our grocery stock, they took care of us when we were sick, and cared for our children so we could go back to work. But as previously mentioned, a lot of these industries are extremely underpaid and undervalued. And although we are nearing a post-COVID-19 crisis here in the United States, it is important to keep fighting for essential workers so that they have safe workplaces, a voice on the job, fair pay, healthcare, and a lot more. We also need to remember that as vaccination rates are rising here in the US, a lot of essential workers are still facing workplace and health safety risks, both because of COVID and other lack of protections. As an example, the CDC lifted their mask mandate for vaccinated people, but there's no real way to enforce that unvaccinated people are wearing masks. So how do we keep protecting workers if our government is failing us in those certain ways? And another example, farm workers here in Ohio lack basic things like a hand washing station. So when we think about a post-COVID economy and environment, we cannot think about returning to normal, because normal really threatens the mental and physical health of our essential workers.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Now, kicking it over to Mike. Mike, some states and cities have started to provide hazard pay for certain essential workers. What does the American Rescue Plan Act allow for, and what should Ohio prioritize in that regard?
That's right. So the American Rescue Plan Act allows for up to $25,000 in hazard pay. That's $13 per hour as a maximum for frontline essential workers. That can be paid retroactively for folks who went to work during the worst part of the crisis, when many businesses were ordered closed, and many of us were able to shelter safely at home because of the work that these frontline essential workers were doing. At least 6 states and a number of local governments have passed hazard pay for their essential workers. Typically, they're paying around $1,200. That would be a great start. It's basically an additional stimulus check. Now, some of the states that have paid hazard pay so far did so out of unallocated CARES Act money that they already got previously, and many of them are now looking at doing additional payments. Ohio should follow the lead of those states. They include Pennsylvania, Michigan, Virginia. Ohio should pay at least $1,200. Local governments that have ARPA funds directed to themselves as well can also make payments. And those hazard pay payments should go first to the frontline workers who are most in need of them. The American Rescue Plan requires that if governments want to pay hazard pay to folks who make more than 150% of the average wage for their state, that they have to submit special requests to do so. So the money is really meant to go to the folks who were doing the work that we absolutely depended on at risk to themselves and their families, and to those who are not being adequately paid for it. That's where it should go.
Thanks for that, Mike. Back to you, Laura. So with Essential Ohio, y'all are leading, I think, some fantastic work to center Ohioans in the recovery. If you could maybe just tell people who are watching more about the work that you're doing there and how people can get involved.
Of course. So throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, Essential Ohio and other local and national organizations across the country have been advocating for what we call the Essential Worker Bill of Rights that was introduced by Senator Warren and Rep. Khanna. And they have been working across sectors to not only demand that all individuals who have been deemed as essential have protections during the pandemic, but that a post-COVID economy and society is one that values all workers and the rights they have reflected. So Essential Ohio worked on passing 4 resolutions in Ohio cities, Toledo, Columbus, Dayton, and Lakewood. And we are working to pass more, but these cities are our first targets in advocating for using the ARPA money for hazard pay. Some other pieces that the Essential Worker Bill of Rights include is paid leave, affordable childcare, healthcare, and other health and safety protections at work. And also we are fighting for a path to citizenship. So here in Ohio, people can get involved by contacting your local mayors, city council members, and your county commissioners, and call them and tell them that you want the ARPA money to be used to help essential workers through hazard pay and other things. Additionally, on the citizenship front, there are 3 different bills in the Senate for citizenship for a large swath of the country, but specifically there's the Citizenship for Essential Workers Act. Here you can call your senators and ask them to pass this and fight for this bill in Congress. And also Essential Ohio will be hosting a town hall for this later in the month, so keep an eye out for that. And finally, I think it's very important that we keep in mind that the ARPA fund should be used to advocate for a just recovery. And we need to fight as hard as we can to make sure we repay the people that protected us so hard during this pandemic.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And as a resident of Lakewood, thank you for your work on passing that ordinance and for all the great work that y'all are doing. So to switch it up a little bit, I guess, Mike, in this discussion, I think, we've had many, conversations about what this means for job quality standards. I know that you talked with advocates in Cincinnati who proposed 2 different ordinances on, that would use some portion of the American Rescue Plan Act dollars to protect working people's rights on the job. Could you tell us a little bit more about those?
Definitely. And, before we jump into that, I want to just say, we've talked a lot on this call about hazard pay. I think that that's a really important fix, but a short-term one. Many of the folks that we've relied on the most to get us through this crisis are among Ohio's lowest paid. And we really need a permanent fix for that. I found in a report this spring that passing a $15 minimum wage in Ohio by 2026 would benefit some 1.6 million Ohioans. So that's something that we really need to start thinking about. We need to make sure that we've got a minimum wage in Ohio that covers the basic cost of living for everybody working here in Ohio. But I don't want to get us too far afield here. You asked about ordinances in Cincinnati to protect people's rights on the job. And I'll start here because this is really straightforward. Cities should take a small chunk of the ARPA dollars that they receive and use them to set up a fund that gives marginalized workers access to legal counsel and know your rights education. The Cincinnati Workers' Rights Project provides legal help to low-paid workers, but it's a volunteer-led effort. We've got to make investments in this. We know that over 200,000 Ohioans become victims of wage theft every year. That's accounting for non-payment of the minimum wage alone. We know that the typical victim loses about $2,800. So in the context of COVID-19 also, there have been a host of other workplace rights violations. OSHA, under President Trump, scaled back its investigations of workplace safety violations, even as they were getting new complaints rolling in. So the CWRP has proposed that Cincinnati take $2 million out of its $280 million that the city will receive, so that's less than 1%, and use it to fund legal services and education for low-paid workers. All Ohio's major cities will be getting substantial sums of money like this. Cleveland's going to get $512 million. So using even 1% would enable cities to create an endowment to protect workers on the job.
That's fantastic. Those are, it's heartening to hear that, but I guess to maybe look at another area of this, we know that a large chunk of this money is going to be directed toward businesses, and with that, sure to happen, there I think are some are there some ways that we can make sure that some of those dollars are spent and that it can help enhances job quality?
Definitely. So the first bucket of in which ARPA funds are allowed to be distributed is to respond to the pandemic and its negative economic impact. So under that purview, we know that businesses will be getting a lot of funds from both the state and local governments. We should make sure that workers and independent contractors employed by businesses that receive those dollars are treated with dignity and respect. To do it, government should mandate that businesses comply with all local, state, federal labor, employment, and health safety laws. So this is fairly basic stuff. These laws are already on the books, but one of the things that we really need is enforcement, and we should be making sure that any businesses that are receiving these dollars are in fact complying with those guidelines. That's a way to make sure that the dollars are all spent in ways that really uplift working people. And to achieve this, local governments could implement American Rescue Plan Act spending rules. So those should include clear requirements that employers are meeting existing labor law standards. It's wage and hour laws. It's OSHA. It's non-discrimination laws. Employers should be required to provide notice to their employees of their rights. That includes a right to form a union at work and to bargain collectively for better treatment and to form that union without fear of retaliation on the part of their employers. And to the extent that we can go further than that, there may be opportunities within the scope of community benefit agreements. One of the things that the ARPA allows for is some infrastructure is limited. It's water and broadband infrastructure, but those projects can come with community benefit agreements that require things like labor neutrality, which is to say that employers won't fight working people when they attempt to form a union, and things like just cause, so that employers can't fire workers without having a good cause for doing so.
And that's excellent to hear. Now, just a reminder for folks who are watching, please do add any questions or comments in the chat. We will be monitoring that and hopefully answering any of your questions at the end of the call. But diving right into this other part of the conversation in terms of worker support and unemployment compensation. First question would go to Zach. When we look at what the American Rescue Plan Act does provide, what does it mean? What does it provide for unemployment compensation? And are all of the benefits of the Rescue Plan Act available in Ohio?
Well, thanks for asking about that, Daniel. There are three principal things that the Rescue Plan Act does when it comes to unemployment compensation. Three programs, especially, that have wide use in Ohio and around the country. It's a bit of an alphabet soup to try and remember them all, but one of them is called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. And this PUA program is for people who don't ordinarily qualify for unemployment. For people, it includes gig workers, Uber drivers, but it also includes many low-wage Ohioans who wouldn't ordinarily qualify. For instance, if you were a restaurant worker who was laid off, was making the minimum wage and working as much as 30 hours a week, you would not qualify for regular unemployment in Ohio, but you will qualify for PUA. And so again, I think that's further exposed how we need an unemployment insurance system that covers low-wage workers, as PUA does. And we have currently 150,000 Ohioans receiving PUA benefits. The second program is called the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation. And what that does is it extends the number of weeks that you can receive benefits. So normally in Ohio, as in most states, you're eligible for up to 26 weeks of unemployment benefits. However, we know that so many workers have not been able to get a job and need additional support, just as they have in every recession since at least the 1950s. Congress has offered additional weeks of benefits. So in this case, PEUC is offering up to another 53 weeks of benefits. It will basically take the benefits till the first week in September, September 4th, is when all of these programs currently run till. The third one, which is now unfortunately the exception to that, is called Pandemic Unemployment Compensation. And that's the one which is the additional $300 a week that basically almost anybody on unemployment has been receiving in Ohio and around the country. There are therefore almost 300,000 Ohioans who have been getting this $300 a week. And unfortunately, our governor saw fit to terminate this. And so as of June 26th, that benefit will be cut off. And that is really bad news. I think we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but because there are also some things you can do to try and fight that. Our state legislature, at least our state Senate, wants to end these other programs even earlier because in a number of other states, governors have even gone beyond what Governor DeWine has done, and they've cut off these two other programs, which in Ohio would be 250,000 people not getting benefits. So I think I'll leave it there for the moment, but those are the three principal programs, and the one, of course, that DeWine has cut off, which is really a bad thing for so many Ohioans.
Thank you for that overview, Zach. Going to Kalia, you have been doing some fantastic organizing, doing a lot of great work with Unemployed Action Ohio, and with the folks that you're working with, the organizing that you're doing. What are the things and the types of actions that people can take to fight that cutoff of the $300 a week?
Thanks, Daniel. Well, the first thing that comes to mind, and I just want to reiterate this, these funds are supposed to last until September. So the reason why they were supposed to last till September is because we needed it. People are still in need of this relief. And one of the ways that you can fight the cutoff is by telling your story. And one of the ways that you can do that is participating in our organizing group. So we have a action coming up next week on Thursday, June 17th at 11 a.m. It's going to be at the Columbus State House and in the Ladies Gallery. And we are having a presser, so a press conference and a visual demonstration. And we're coming together as unemployed workers across Ohio, as allies of unemployed workers, of pro-labor folks, just everyone who has seen the impact of this pandemic and of the job and has experienced job loss. I welcome to come as in solidarity or to step into your power and share your story with the rest of the world, because One of the other things is we need to break the stigma and shame and these false narratives around unemployment. So that is another way that you can fight the cutoff. We also have a petition that myself and a lovely volunteer, Cynthia, helped write. It is a petition to Governor DeWine, and it's to tell him to not end the fully funded federal pandemic unemployment insurance and to keep the $300. And then we are having a meeting next week. So as Daniel said, the group that I'm organizing with is called Unemployed Action Ohio. We're actually renaming ourselves because that's what the people have decided, so that we could reform as like a union, so that when we're bringing folks in, because this is in order to truly get the changes and the reform, whether it's federal or state reform of the unemployment system and to improve it, we need to hear from all folks who have been impacted by this in order to push back on the narrative that we're hearing and the stigma. And if you want to be a part of this power building mission, which is empowering unemployed workers to collectively bargain for better treatment, a safety net that doesn't leave folks behind, and to overall federalize the system so that there is a standard that includes all workers, including those who do not traditionally qualify. So just to quickly go over, we're having an action next week in Columbus. There are opportunities for volunteers and speakers. So reach out if you're interested. You can join our Facebook group at Unemployed Action Ohio. That's the name for now until we update everything. We have weekly meetings every Wednesday at 5 p.m. over Zoom. So if you want to be part of the strategy, the planning, figuring out what is the overarching next moves past this $300 fight, because it's not over with just this $300. You can participate that way. And of course, signing and amplifying our petition to Governor DeWine to not end this fully funded relief.
Awesome. Those are some fantastic action steps. And for folks watching, you should be able to find those links in the comments or the chat. And definitely, make sure that we all show up. 1 week from today, is June 17th. So make sure to show up in solidarity. I guess the question to both Kalia and Zach, and maybe going to Zach first, is, with this cut, what does this cut of, off of the $300 mean for Ohio's economy? And maybe just tell a little bit more on why the Rescue Act provisions are so important.
Well, I think, as cruel as this reduction is to families, and it is, one of the other purposes of unemployment insurance, since it was founded in 1935 as part of the Social Security Act at that time, was first to provide aid to workers who are unemployed, to keep them and their families from becoming destitute so that they can, in fact, find new work. But then secondly, to provide a floor for purchasing power so that communities affected by unemployment, people are able to go out and go to the grocery store to buy what they need, or all of the other goods and services that are so important. And so one of the important purposes of unemployment compensation is to do just that, is to keep the economy going. And I think that to the degree that we saw a stronger economy last year than was feared a year ago, a huge part of that was all of the actions that the federal government took, including this greater unemployment insurance through all of these different programs to bolster the economy. In Ohio, we have received $20 billion in money from the federal government for unemployment insurance in the past year and some months. That's a phenomenal amount of money. And it doesn't just mean that it's helpful to the families. It means that Ohio businesses benefited to a gigantic degree from this. And conversely, when Governor DeWine cuts off this $300, that's going to be $1 billion that does not get spent in the state of Ohio. That means there are going to be businesses all over the state who do not get the same kind of demand that cannot employ the same number of workers, that cannot pay all of their bills as well, because they're not seeing the demand that they would get. We've taken that $1 billion and just flushed it down the toilet. And instead of helping Ohio businesses, which this would do, they're thumbing their nose at Ohio businesses. So this is not something that's going to help Ohio business. This is going to hurt Ohio business. And in the sense that they aren't going to be getting that spending. And that's another important element in why unemployment insurance is such a bulwark and such an important part of allowing us to be a modern economy.
I'm right there with you. Turning away $1 billion definitely seems short-sighted and wrong-headed. Anything you want to add, Kalia, or any other comments?
Yeah, I would just say when it comes to the economy, we are the economy. We saw in 2020, and when I say we, I mean Ohio's workforce, Ohio's unemployed workforce especially. So throughout 2020, we saw that the stimulus checks and all the other forms of relief were very much effective, not only in folks' lives, but for the economy because of how they were able to then spend that money to go back into Ohio. And it's frustrating just because the amount of wealthy people who have thrived throughout the COVID-19 pandemic and who have profited, and there's so many people who are continuing to experience the harm and the impacts of the pandemic and who are going to feel the ripple effects of it. So to have this narrative that, that people don't want to go back to work, or that people are making more on unemployment than they are at their jobs. People want to go back to work, but they need this federal relief. And the fact that it is free and fully funded by the federal government, that's the people's money. So the people need their money. And the other thing that I will just throw out there is I know that Governor DeWine had suggested or encouraged that the federal relief went towards paying off employer taxes on unemployment through a federal loan, to pay off a federal loan. And that's not what we need to be using this relief for. We have people who need this money. So I just want to also point out that we often hear that this is going to be good for small businesses, and that's a whole nother narrative. The smallest business owner in Ohio is the self-employed worker, is the contractor. So I just want to put that out there. We're really trying to be all in this together and inclusive. Then we need to reform the system, or at least apply a federal standard that is inclusive to all workers, not just these small businesses that are actually part of larger corporations. And that's all I had to say about that.
No, I'm here for it. Thank you so much for that. I'm struck by that point of just, some of these narratives, these stories that continue to be told and unfortunately elevated, are really missing the voice of workers to be a counterbalance. It's, I think, something that hopefully folks who are watching today make sure that, their news sources and media providers hear that they let them know we need to hear and center workers' voices and have appropriate and balanced coverage there. Another question, though, is, and this one's for you, Zach, in terms of the role that the federal government plays in our unemployment compensation system, how can our federal government, take additional steps to help that situation? And, what can people do to support that?
Well, I think, the unemployment system goes back to 1935, and it was set up as a federal-state partnership where the federal government sets certain guidelines, but the states have enormous authority to decide who's eligible for benefits, how much is paid, et cetera, within some very, very modest federal requirements. And I think what we've seen with the action of Governor DeWine and other governors deciding not to accept some of these benefit payments is we need a much stronger federal system where states can't do that. We need people in all states to be eligible for certain minimums of benefits for at least the 26 weeks, which unfortunately some states have gotten away from. We see a whole attack emerging on the unemployment system, as it does every time there's this kind of a situation. They basically want to go after the benefit levels. And the Ohio Chamber of Commerce even started that some months back. Thankfully, they've not been successful, and we pushed back against it. But the only way to really settle these issues in a way that's going to help workers on a long-term basis is for us to have a much stronger federal system for this program, whether it's the federal government taking it over altogether or setting much, much stronger guardrails so that we can't see states turning down billions of dollars of benefits for workers who desperately need them and for their economies that need them as well. And that we have some standards on how much employers have to pay, because in Ohio, our employers have underfunded this system for decades because of how state policymakers have set the system up. And this is all possible because we have this kind of federal system where the states have so much authority. And, we see this in other kinds of programs too, where compromises are made in Washington to get bills passed. But the result is that workers don't get what they need and families don't get what they need. And this is another example of that. And so going forward, there is going to be an effort to see an overhaul of the unemployment system at the federal level. There will be a push in Congress to do that over the next few months. And I think that you'll have opportunities to contact your Congress people, and you could do so even now, to say, hey, we can't put up with this kind of behavior. We've got to have a strong federal system for this, and we need all of our Congress to get behind that.
That's a great response, I think, in giving us some analysis and some clarity on where people could look on this. And this, gets my blood flowing and thinking about the organizing work that's ahead of us. And I have one more question for Kalia, but also I'll throw this out to also potentially Lauda or other folks on the panel if you want to think or share ideas on how people can get organized and what steps folks can take. But I guess first, Kalia, what are some of the highlights or things that you want to share about how Ohio's unemployed workers have been organizing, and what are the types of things that you hope to see going forward with that organizing?
Yeah, so I just want to shout out all of the amazing volunteers who I've had the honor of working with for the past year, who have been supporting all this work. If it wasn't for them pushing past the stigmas, trying to actively seek answers, advocating for not just themselves, but on behalf of all unemployed Ohioans and just Ohio workers as a whole, but also for themselves and sharing their vulnerabilities, their experience. I just want to just take some space to shout out to all of y'all. If you're watching, hey there, because this just wouldn't be possible, because what needs to be centered with everything that we do is unemployed workers and getting their stories told. So one of the things that we've done is showing up to hearings. There is an unemployment modernization and improvement council that was put together by Governor DeWine. They've had a couple of public hearings where myself and a couple of volunteer leaders have come down and shared our stories face to face and let the council members know that we have actual recommendations. So, and that leads me into the second thing that we've been doing is providing recommendations. So, of course, it's having community in a space to not just vent, but to process what's happening, especially with all of the hurdles, sometimes purposeful, but all of the hurdles that are there to when navigating the claims process, even just appeals, even if you can get that far to appeal, with how the system is. But it's just very difficult navigating how, like, Ohio's broken unemployment system. So one of the ways that people have also been showing up is coming to these volunteer meetings, because this is a lot. There's a lot going on, but having it centered in what do unemployed workers in Ohio need? What do we want? What do we want to move towards in the future is something that just needs to be ever present in all of the conversations. And along with from those conversations, we're able to create recommendations that are centered in improving the system from a worker / claimant perspective, versus what seems to be happening on this council is centering the improvements on private businesses and insurance companies and banks and just privately owned private partnerships. So I think that there needs to become a partnership of the public, we the people, we the public, we Ohio's workforce, and being a part of these conversations, making sure that as federal relief is coming, or as like these bills are being written, that we continue advocating for unemployment so that it doesn't get put on the back burner, because we spent all 2020 getting put on the back burner. We don't need to be spending 2021 like that. We're halfway through the year. We need to be bouncing back. So I would say share your story. Even if you aren't tech savvy, we're organizing online on Facebook. So even if you aren't tech savvy, please come to the space. You are welcomed. And we are doing in-person action. So once again, on the 17th, if you would like to be a speaker to share your story, if you would just like to volunteer, if you just want to come and support in solidarity, I welcome you to attend. And the last thing that I'll mention before these birds go crazy in front of my window are for you to just, once again, step into your power and know that this isn't just about $300. This isn't just about, oh, like, I need money, like money. It's not about like a number. It's about dignity. It's about us being included in this process, and of us coming together collectively after the treatment and trauma that many of us experienced last year, to heal together, but not just like thoughts and prayers. We need real changes. We need to take action. So I will pass it to whoever else wants to speak about organizing and around UC or anything else.
No, that was awesome, Kalia. Yeah, I would just echo your statements on, how we show up, come together, and really make a stand for dignity for all Ohioans is so vital. But any of our other panelists, especially, I think this is a big connected conversation in terms of, if you want to share anything about the organizing and the work that you're doing on justice for workers and job quality, any other final remarks?
Well, I would just like to reiterate what Kalia said. It's very important to share your story here. I encourage you all that if you can't go to the action that Kalia is doing, to call your local state congresspeople and senators and fight for this, because that's the most important thing. Even if you have to stay home because you're still nervous about the pandemic, you haven't been vaccinated or anything, you can still fight from home, and that's what's the important thing.
It's a fantastic point. There are so many ways to get involved, and I'm grateful for all of the thoughtful organizing that you all are doing to make sure that we offer people a lot of different opportunities to plug in, and definitely for folks who are watching this live or in the rebroadcast, please do look through the comments. We have a lot of amazing links here to not just information, but ways to take action, right? And not all of these actions are the same. There's a lot of different ways in which you can be engaged. But before we close, I just have to say, one, I'm so grateful, thankful for today's panelists. Y'all are amazing. And again, remember, if you're watching this before Thursday, June 17th, that there will be the action, the unemployment action at the State House, Thursday the 17th at 11 a.m. So please show up and show out. Also, at Policy Matters, we're working on advocating for a people's budget. We're going to have an action that you can join online on Monday, June 21st at 1 p.m. But again, please do sign up for our e-news, like, follow, and subscribe to our social media accounts for notifications on how to stay involved in Ohio's policy conversation going forward. And just thank you so much for watching Policy Matters Now. And remember, your voice matters.